Like, this is relatively controversial.
Here's what goes wrong with a lot of young people.
A lot of people underestimate the power of
Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. So, over the last few months, I have done a bunch of interviews with people on my podcast who are ridiculously financially successful, like millionaires, multi-millionaires, entrepreneurs, creators, authors, people who've had a lot of financial success in life. And obviously there are a lot of things in life more important than money, but there's no getting around the fact that for a lot of us, financial independence is something that we're striving towards because it unlocks autonomy and freedom and the ability to kind of do what you want. And so in this video, I want to share 5 of the top principles that have most resonated with me around how to get financial success. And thank you so much to Shopify for sponsoring this video, but more on them a little bit later. Let's get started. All right, so coming in at number 5, we have a principle from Alex Hormozi. Now, Alex is a ridiculously successful $100 million plus entrepreneur. He's absolutely jacked as well. And this principle is about how to invest your money. Now, there's this thing that you might be familiar with called the S&P 500. And most people, including me, would say that, hey, if you're trying to invest your money, you should invest it in the S&P 500 because it's like you're investing a little bit of money into each of these different 500 companies. And so you're very diversified. But Alex's point has really changed the way that I approach investing now because, like, if we think about it, what is the point of investing? The point of investing money is that you're putting money into something and you're hoping that that investment will return more money than you put into it over the long term. Now, the S&P 500 as an index fund returns maybe 7% a year. So if you put in $100 this year, it will be $107 next year. And the principle that I took away from Alex is that there is a far better use of your money than putting it into the S&P, which is putting it into the S and me.
It's a whole S&P 500 versus S&P 500. You will get a significantly higher return investing in your own ability to make money than you will in any market.
Basically what he's saying is invest in yourself and invest in your own ability to make money and invest in your own skills. Because if you imagine the S&P 500 is generating 7% returns every year, it's like you're making $7 for every $100 that you put in over time. But if instead of investing that money into a stock market index fund, you instead invested it in a course or in a piece of software or something that would level up your own ability to make money, now you're generating way more than 7% returns on that capital. For example, let's say you spend $100 on a course on copywriting and now you land a client as a copywriter and you charge that client $500. You've generated a 500% return on that $100, and it's going to compound over time as well because now you've leveled up your own ability and your own kind of worth as an entrepreneur or as someone in the market. And so now when people ask me like, hey Ali, I've got a few extra quid, how do I invest it? Like, what do you recommend investing in? The thing I would always say is like, look, if you care about growing your money, then the thing you want to be investing in, especially early on in your career, is your own skills and your own ability to make money. Because whether you're a freelancer or an entrepreneur or a creator or an author, or you have a normal job, or you're a student, any amount of money that you can invest in improving your own skills, these skills are going to stay with you for the rest of your life. Whereas, yeah, okay, fine, 7% returns in the S&P 500, great. Like 50 years from now, maybe you'll be a millionaire, but if you can invest that money into your own skills, now you're really off to the races. So practical takeaway here, ask yourself, what can I invest in that will improve my own skills and my own ability to make money rather than thinking of investing in a passive stock market index fund, which you don't really have any control over. All right, coming in at number 4, we have a principle from Daniel Priestley. Now, Daniel became a multi-millionaire at the age of 23 by starting his own marketing agency. But from the ages of 19 to 21, he actually spent 2 years working at a small business, working for a startup. And so I asked Daniel that what is the value of working for someone else's startup? Should you try and work for someone else's startup if you're trying to get rich? Or should you just try and do your own thing? Because obviously you learn more by doing your own thing. And Daniel's view was that if anyone is trying to become an entrepreneur, there is incredible value in actually joining a small business, a small company, a small startup, and working there for at least a year or 2. And I think this is a really important point because, like, for example, when I was at university, all of the companies that would advertise at careers fairs, those would be like the massive corporates that have thousands of employees. But if you're just one cog in a machine that has thousands of employees, you don't really learn very much. You learn a very, very, very narrow specific skill set on how to use Excel or how to make PowerPoint presentations. You have no idea how the business works. You have no idea what the top line revenue, bottom line profit is. You don't know any of that kind of stuff. And so in the UK, for example, there are apparently a few hundred to a few thousand businesses that have over 250 employees, i.e. big companies, but there are like 5 million businesses that have fewer than 10 employees. And so if you can join a business that has maybe 2, 3, 4 people, now you're an integral part of that team. And if you're spending the first couple of years of your working life in a company like that, now you understand how the world of business works because you have visibility over the revenue, over the profits, over the costs. You're able to be in the meetings where negotiations happen and you just learn so much more than you would if you were sitting at your desk and making very niche specific PowerPoints for a big consulting firm, for example.
It's massively useful to join someone else's startup. Like, I would highly recommend that to absolutely anyone.
And in our interview, which is absolutely fantastic, would recommend listening to it if you haven't yet. In our interview, Daniel talked about how the skills that he learned in those 2 years working for a small startup directly translated into him being able to become a multimillionaire at the age of 23. All right, coming in at number 3, we have a principle from Tim Armu. Now, Tim started his company at age 21, and then at age 27, he sold the company for somewhere between $20 and $50 million. He wasn't exactly allowed to say the specific number, but that is an absolutely absurd amount of wealth to unlock at such a young age. And so in the interview with Tim, we talked about his whole journey and how he got started with entrepreneurship and how, being a broke kid in school, how he developed the chops and the skills of entrepreneurship to eventually get to a point where he could have this ridiculous 8-figure exit. And there's a great story from Tim's early life that illustrates this principle that has really stuck with me since that interview. Now, when he was around like 17 years old, 16, 17 years old, something like that, Tim started this like entrepreneurship magazine for his school, and he was trying to kind of land interviews with entrepreneurs so he could print them in a magazine, and then he could get sponsorship for the magazine, and then he could like sell it or give it away to people. And there was an entrepreneurship conference that was happening in London where massive big name speakers like Richard Branson and I think Gary Vaynerchuk were speaking at, and Tim did whatever he could to get an invite for this conference. He tried emailing the organizers. I think the tickets were like super expensive, and obviously he couldn't afford it because he was a kid. But eventually what he did was that he found the person who was in charge of running the conference, and he basically emailed them like repeatedly, and he emailed them saying, look, I will help you out in whatever way I possibly can. I will show up the day before the conference and I will stack all the chairs for you, and I'll lay them out all in a line and make sure everything's all good. And then after the conference is over, I'm gonna wrap up the chairs for you as well. All I want is a free ticket to the conference because I want to be able to speak to these people. And I think that's a level of tenacity that I certainly haven't done myself, and that I don't see a lot of other people doing either, where Tim was kind of willing to basically do anything. He was willing to spend like a whole day stacking chairs just to get access to this conference. And through doing that, he managed to get backstage access. He got an interview with Richard Branson, and that was one of the things that propelled his entrepreneurship journey. And I think the principle that this illustrates is something that Alex Banayan would call the third door. And so the analogy he uses is that life is like a nightclub, and there are always 3 doors into a nightclub. You've got the first door, which is where people are queuing up for blocks and blocks to get into the nightclub, where you're joining the queue with everyone else. You've got the second door, which is the door for the billionaires and the celebrities and the people with privilege, where they can just walk in. But what no one tells you is that in life and in business, there is always a third door. There is always a little side door in the alley where you kind of go down, you jump over the fence a little bit, you like open the kitchen window, you go in through the kitchen, you make friends with the kitchen staff, and you kind of get your way in through the third door. And what Alex finds in his journey of interviewing all these people is that all of these successful people that you know, and all these famous people, a lot of them used the third door. They didn't stand in queue waiting to be picked. They weren't necessarily born to families of privilege where they could just get in by default, but they found a way to use the third door. And when Tim was telling me that story about his stacking chairs, it really reminded me a lot of this book, because that's very much third door thinking. By the way, very excitingly, the podcast Deep Dive with Ali Abdaal has recently hit 150,000 subscribers here on YouTube. And so we're actually doing a giveaway in thank you for being a subscriber to the podcast, where we're giving away some AirPod Pros that you can use to listen to the podcast if you want, and also a bunch of books that have been recommended by guests across a bunch of different categories, including health, wealth, love, happiness, and impact. If you're interested in joining that giveaway, then all the details are linked down in the video description. All right, coming in at number 2, we have another principle from Daniel Priestley that completely blew my mind when he first told me about it in the podcast. Again, you can check out the podcast link down below. Now, Daniel was talking about how a bunch of businesses that he's advised, that he's worked with, have been really struggling. The thing they struggle with is that they just don't have enough people going in through the door. And what Daniel's original business was doing was it was generating leads for these businesses. So for example, let's say you've got a financial planning business and you're trying to sell financial planning services to people. What Daniel's business would do was that they would run introductory events, like introduction to the markets, introduction to investing and budgeting and stuff. And then people would attend those events for free. And then some of those people would then be interested in the financial planning services. And this is what's called lead generation. You're generating these signals of interest from the market. You're not saying, hey, come buy my financial planning services, because no one's going to do that. You're saying, hey, attend this totally free event, which is all about giving you value on how to invest your money. And then maybe some people at that event might be the sort of people that would be interested in the financial planning services. And what Daniel found, and what all these businesses found, is that when you turn on the lead generation tap, when you have loads of people coming to your free events, it just completely blows up your business in like a really good way. And so the principle that Daniel taught me in this interview is that everything is downstream of lead generation. You could be the best business in the world at doing the thing, but if no one knows you're doing the thing, if you don't have any leads, your business is going to completely fail. There's a classic phrase in startup land, which is that first-time founders focus on product, but second-time founders focus on distribution. Like the first time you build something, you're always like, I need to make the product really good, and then people will come. And the second time you make something, you're like, that was a mistake. I need to really make sure that people will come to the product first. I need to focus on distribution. I need to focus on lead generation, and I can always build the product further down the line. And we've taken this principle that everything is downstream of lead generation to everything that we now do in this business, all of the courses that we make. Previously, it was like, I have an idea for a course. We spend ages making the course, and then we worry about, is this course actually going to be useful? Whereas now what we do, everything is downstream of lead generation. We generate a scorecard, like a little quiz to see, is this something people are actually interested in? We try and get signals from the market through social media to be like, hey, do Do you struggle with camera confidence? Is this something you're interested in? And based on the signals from the market, that is when we decide, is this course actually worth making, or is it a total waste of time? And I've recommended this episode to so many people, and everyone I've recommended it to has said, oh my God, my mind is blown by how much value I was given completely for free in this totally free podcast episode. So you should totally check that out. But secondly, if you're coming up with a business idea, ask yourself, how can I validate this idea first? What's my minimum viable product going to be? How can I generate leads before you worry about making the product? Now, once you've gotten to the point where you've generated the leads for your product and now you actually want to sell them something, then one of the best platforms that you can use for this is Shopify, who are very kindly sponsoring this video. Shopify is the world's best online platform for e-commerce, for basically selling anything over the internet, and to be honest, off the internet as well, because they have a bunch of offline tools too. And it's a fantastic way to start your own business or side hustle without needing to do fancy stuff like learning how to code. Shopify powers more entrepreneurs than anyone else. There are millions of businesses using Shopify in over 175 countries. We've been using Shopify to sell our own stationery brand, and we've recently switched to using Shopify to selling our online courses as well. And it's just great for physical products and digital products and everything else in between. Now, if you want, you can also sell subscriptions using Shopify. And subscription recurring revenue is often regarded as the holy grail of revenue, as talked about by a lot of these podcast guests that we've mentioned. And so using one of Shopify's subscription apps, you can build a flexible, totally customizable subscription solution for any kind of business that you want. Now, if you're interested in trying this out and potentially generating leads and sales for your business, then head over to shopify.com/AliSubs, ALISUBS, and that specific link will give you a totally free trial to Shopify so you can try it out totally risk-free and you can see if it vibes with you. So thank you so much, Shopify, for powering my own business and for sponsoring this video. And coming in at principle number 1 is something that I learned from Aaron Maney, whose YouTube channel, Mr. Who's the Boss, which has like 13 million subscribers, you might be familiar with. Now, this wasn't exactly a how do you get rich or how do you grow a business type situation when I discussed with Aaron. It was more like how do you grow a YouTube channel? But actually, there was a principle that Aaron talked about which really resonated with me and that I've been thinking about basically ever since we did that interview, which was about a year ago. And I asked Aaron, how did he grow his YouTube channel? Like, how is it that his videos just keep on getting millions and millions of views and he's just like making stupid amounts of money and stupidly popular and like getting tons and tons of free stuff and being flown around the world to all these tech conferences? How did it all happen? And basically what he said is, firstly, he's been doing it for a very long time. Like, he's been on YouTube since like 2007 or something absurd like that. And for the first several years of him making videos, he wasn't even showing his face because he was too scared of being bullied at school. So he just made hundreds of videos just with his hands and his voice where he was just reviewing tech. But then we talked about his latest videos that are getting like millions of views every time. And I asked him how long it takes him to write one of his scripts.
It took about 8 days of scripting, I think.
So about 100 hours of scripting.
Something like that. Yeah, I wasn't keeping track, but it was a long time.
And still to this day, I cannot believe just how long Aaron spends writing a script for his YouTube video. Like, I spend maybe an hour writing some of my scripts, and I think that that's quite a lot of time because I tend to go with bullet points and riff on these videos and speak from the heart. Whereas Aaron spends like 40, 50, 60, sometimes 100 hours scripting a video. And that showed like the amount of effort that goes into that seems to directly translate into the success of his YouTube channel. And when Aaron said this to me, there was one thing that I found myself thinking, which is a quote from Teller of Penn and Teller, the magician duo, is that often magic is just putting in more time and effort into something than anyone else thinks is even remotely reasonable. And that's a formula that Mr. Who's the Boss is using as well. He's just putting more time and effort into his videos than is even remotely reasonable. And so it's so hard to compete with that. It's so hard to compete against someone who's putting in tons and tons of time and also seeming to enjoy the process that, like, how are you going to compete with that? And this is an idea that a bunch of other guests on the podcast have also said over time, that if you want extraordinary results, you need to have extraordinary inputs. And it's really, really hard to succeed, and get disproportionate levels of success without putting in a ton of work as well. And I think nowadays it's very fashionable to like hustle culture is bad and putting in work is bad and work-life balance and all this kind of stuff. But none of these people, in the early days of their channels or their businesses or whatever, none of them had what they would call work-life balance. They just put in tons and tons of time and effort into doing the work. But by virtue of doing the work, they managed to get ahead of the curve and they managed to, quote, succeed. And now they've got the luxury of having work-life balance, potentially. So the way that I apply this is that I think to myself, do I want an extraordinary outcome? And if so, am I putting in the extraordinary effort required to get to that extraordinary outcome? Because if I'm putting in the same work as everyone else, I can't expect to succeed beyond the level of where everyone else is at. Now, if you enjoyed this video and you're interested in learning more about this entrepreneurship stuff, this is the interview that I did with Daniel Priestley, which is one of my favorite episodes of all time. And that's over on the Deep Dive Podcast YouTube channel, but these are also available on Spotify and iTunes and any other podcast app. So you can check that out completely for free. Have a look over there. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you hopefully in the next video. Bye-bye.